Hi, everybody. Today we have kind of a special video. I'm going to interview a guest who actually is a friend of mine from years ago. I haven't actually seen her in a while, but I wanted to reconnect with her because in my private practice, I work with suicidal clients from time to time. So I have to keep up on everything, really, the numbers, what's going on with the stats, and so on. Just looking back a few years ago, suicides in 2021 in the US were 48,183 and went up in 2022 to 49,449. So this is just a trend that we need to be aware of. It's all about the increase, which is why I wanted to do this topic today. So with that said, I will introduce a friend of mine who I haven't seen in a while. So it's so good to reconnect with her, Kendra Nicholson. She and her husband, Brad, now do not live in California currently, but I knew them when they did. And my husband, the four of us would do things together occasionally. Their son, Trevor, committed suicide. Like anybody else, you want to just put your arms around them, especially the parents, and just hug them, right? And sometimes all of us, we're not sure exactly what to say. We don't know how much to dig or not dig. But even aside from that, just to hear, which we will today, from the parent in terms of, yeah, tell us your story. We want to hear Kendra's story, right? So anyway, Kendra, I hope that did you justice. Feel free to add a little bit more as you describe why you were willing to join me today on the video.
Absolutely. Actually, thank you for reaching out to me. I think that obviously this is something that is so incredibly important to talk about and to, I think, like you said, to be honest and open about it. Because it is something that we tend to, we tiptoe around it. And, you know, Trevor's story is like once something like this happens in your life, you start to meet other people who have been through something similar. And so I have been in contact with many people who have lost, loved ones, children, sibling, a parent. Um, and it's interesting how they always come to me quietly,
Mm.
and and they don't talk about it on Facebook, and when my son died, and it was in 2018, and it was such an unbelievable shock to me. Obviously, he had it was his freshman year of college, and so you've got this big transition going on, and he was always very shy and struggled socially. And so I think that going to college and going through that big transition, which I think we tend to look at it like it's a very exciting time for
Mhm.
kids that age. And I remember when I graduated that it was a super exciting time, because I was ready to get out of Dodge, and start somewhere new. And I think that, I looked at Trevor's situation and I thought the same thing. I think that we all kind of thought he's gonna get up there, he's gonna get a do-over, he's gonna be a little bit older, and he's maybe going to come out of his shell a little bit,
Mhm.
and obviously that didn't happen. Um, and that transition, I think, proved to be extremely difficult for him. And so he had started school, and then it was right after Thanksgiving. So he'd been there almost a full semester when
Mhm.
we found out that he had stopped going to his classes and was struggling. So my husband went and took him to campus mental health services, and they said that he was definitely severely depressed, was struggling with anxiety, and was at moderate risk for suicide. So, needless to say, we brought him home, and he began seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist. And that part of it was um, tough because of his age. He was 18. And so if he chose not to have, his therapist and psychiatrist share with us, then they didn't have to, unless, he was in danger. And we never got that message from them, and so I'm assuming they didn't know that he was still thinking of completing or attempting suicide. And so he was with us for about a month. And one of the insidious things about it is that it's so unpredictable. In my talks to other people and what they went through with family members or friends, you just don't know, because sometimes people have no idea at all that anything's wrong, and then their loved one attempts suicide. Sometimes they hit rock bottom and they attempt suicide. Sometimes they get better, and then they attempt suicide. So that was my son, Trevor. Trevor came home and struggled for a few weeks, and then he showed improvement. He started going out with his friends again, and he started participating in life again, and it felt like he was coming back to us. And then we lost him. So.
Yes, it's amazing how, and therapists see this a lot, that there can be a bit of a honeymoon period after the initial depth of deep depression, right? And then typically the parents and others feel like, oh, wonderful, they made it out of it, not
Yes.
knowing now, and this could be from antidepressants or something, not knowing that because they're feeling good, they can now begin planning in a very logical way, perhaps, how they may want to take their life, right? So it's this weird dichotomy.
It is. That's exactly what happened. And I think that part of it is, I think, I often wonder if he was feeling relief because he was making a plan, and that he knew it would be over, soon. But there was no note, there was no message. The only thing and I hope this isn't oversharing, but Trevor was a climber. He loved rock climbing, and climbed from the time that he was a little boy. And he ended up climbing, scaling basically a building, a warehouse in the Port of Los Angeles, in the area we lived in. Could get up to the first balcony, and then he went balcony to the roof, and he jumped. And the last message he sent was to his best friend. And kids at that age, if anybody knows what's going on in their lives, it's their best friends. It's, they tell them so much more than they tell their parents. And his friend had no idea. He had no idea that Trevor had stopped, or he knew he stopped going to school, but I think Trevor told him that he just was tired of school and wanted to do something else. He didn't tell him that he was seeing a psychiatrist. He didn't tell him he was struggling with depression or suicidal ideation. But he texted his friend from the roof, and he said, "I'm sorry, but I have to do this." So,
and there we see that shame right there too, in terms of, as you mentioned, which is why we want to do videos like this and books and so on. And we'll get to your book in a second, is talk about it, because even in all that emotional pain, probably the shame on some level for Trevor, I would imagine, is I got to keep this in, got to keep this in. So we want people to know that that's just part of what goes hand in hand with suicidal ideation.
Yes, the secrecy. Yeah. And the secrecy continues. It's not, it is the people that are struggling with suicidal ideation are secretive. And the people who lose their loved ones are also secretive. We are much more secretive. It's getting better. We are talking about it more, but it's alarming to me how much I see people messaging me about friends and loved ones that they're scared about, instead of talking about it openly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Now, one of the things that's common in different situations, especially I think on this topic, is what's called survivor's guilt.
Yes.
And for those left behind, um, what's your awareness of that? Perhaps you and Brad, that creeping in, or just your experience? Did that pop up for you? And what was that like working through? Were you even able to name that it was survivor's guilt that you were going through?
No, that's a great question. Absolutely, 100%. Um, the survivor's guilt, the grief of missing him and knowing he's not going to be with us anymore is soul crushing. But the guilt, the looking back and wishing I had done things differently and
Mm.
questioning myself, and um, it's so real and so pervasive. It also, for me, um, initially when it happened, I was nearly paralyzed and with grief. I could not, I couldn't function. And part of that was the feeling that, um, how can I do anything that brings me positive feelings, that brings me joy, that, um, what kind of mother am I
Uh,
that I can be happy when my son chose to leave. And that is a feeling that going on, wait, we're 6.5 years now later, that I still struggle with. It's still very, very real and very difficult to look at. I saw a therapist, and my therapist said, if his psychiatrist didn't know, his therapist didn't know, and they are professionals, how could you know? And she was correct. But at the time, logic and emotion are, are kind of, in different rooms,
mm,
and for me, it was just this. And I said to her, because I was his mom, I was his
uh,
mom,
uh,
like my job was to um, raise a happy, healthy person. And, to fail on such a massive scale in my mind was just unbearable.
I think the key is in your mind, of course,
Yes.
because most parents, of course, who lose a son or daughter to suicide, generally speaking, have just done their best and are wonderful parents quite often, most of the time, and just can't, it just doesn't make sense, right? And in a way, I can even bring in the therapeutic approach in this sense, in terms of for therapists. I know you're also going to be studying, it sounds like, for a clinical degree.
I
Is the training that we receive is, of course, we're going to cover all our bases and we go out of our way to work with clients who have suicidal ideation. But it's also important to remember that we do not have the final say, right? We just do not. We can be caring, empathic
Yes.
therapists who reach out on all sorts of levels. And sometimes it may work and
Right.
sometimes it doesn't, and a client takes their life. And so just completely understanding what you're saying there,
Yeah.
especially for a mother who gives birth, right? That's sort of inborn, inbred in
Right.
the mother.
Right.
It's interesting to hear you describe it. I also know, and for people watching, Kendra has another son named Cody. And
Yes.
what's the age difference between them? And what was it like? What did you notice generally in terms of watching Cody go through the process of losing his brother?
There was a 4 year age difference between my boys, and Cody's the oldest. And you know, um, it was it has been extremely difficult for him to talk about it. And you know, it it's still hard for him. to talk about it. And so he doesn't a lot. And it has taken several years, but he is now, I think, kind of crawling out of that feeling a little bit. And he seems like he's doing better right now.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It's,
But
it's
he's a very private, very, keeps things to himself when it
yeah,
comes to talking about his brother.
yeah.
Yeah.
Such a process, isn't it? The grieving process,
Yeah.
for that we all have to go through as human
It
beings,
is.
one way or the other, right? We're going to be
It is.
going.
And it's so personal and it's so, whenever I talk to somebody who has lost a child, um, I will talk to another mother who has lost a son to suicide, and I will never ever say to them, I understand how you feel, because we all feel different about our relationships. We all feel different about loss. We all feel different about our part in it. And, I look at my husband, I look at my son, we all lost the same person, but we don't all feel the same way about it. And we don't all grieve the same way. It's a very, it's like a fingerprint, it's like a snowflake. We all kind of do it in our own way.
Absolutely. And I think for all of us, all we can do is really just as much as we can, just respect the person where they're at,
Yes.
depending on who around us is experiencing loss, and
Yes.
just kind of let it be, right? And
It is.
let
Yeah.
them know we're there for them in whatever way we
And I
can. But
think I think that's a really hard thing for people to, you know, when you lose someone to in a violent way or a surprising way or at, a surprising age, we don't know what to say, and I got a lot of that. Because when I said it on Facebook, when I told everybody that Trevor was gone, and there were so many people, lots of sorries, lots of I don't know what to say, or I have no words, and those are all so true. It's very, very hard to know what to say. And I think that, like you said, with the numbers increasing every day, we need to figure out what to say.
Mhm.
We need to figure out how to support people who have had this kind of loss. And, for me, um, I don't know that I have any kind of instruction, but I can share the things that helped me.
Mhm.
Um, and one of those things is, on that same thread where it was sorries and I don't know what to say. Um, I had a friend who said, I remember him in his sweatpants and his little Ugg boots, because that's what he wore all the time. And just reading that, I remember
Uh,
him,
yeah, yeah.
because that's the fear. Because what happens when you have a loss like that is that you um you want your child remembered for their life and not for their death.
Mhm.
But when it's a shocking death, when it's your child jumped from a building, then that's what they become remembered for.
Yes. And it's our jobs, everybody's job, even people who are just even listening now that are completely unfamiliar with this topic. This
Yes.
is why we want to talk about this, right? This is the
Right.
kind of thing. And Kendra was just pointing out what's helpful, and the I remember part for anybody, right? So
It
uh,
is. Yes.
wonderfully said. And you're right about when people leave us in shocking, maybe even violent ways. That's different
It
from somebody leaving in a peaceful way. So. I
is.
know, I know you wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about it. I love the title, The Climb, because obviously we know what that means. So,
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. What was that like for you writing the book?
It was incredibly difficult, incredibly personal. It is not Trevor's story per se, but there's a lot of him in there and a lot of his personality in there, who's so funny, such a funny kid. But the book was written because I knew how much, my older son was struggling, and it was hard for him to talk about it. So I wanted to try to find, I was looking to see like what's out there for siblings, who have lost
Mm-hmm.
someone to suicide. And there just wasn't much out there at that time. And I thought, I can sit around here and I can complain or I can do something about it. And I had been writing a lot on Facebook and sharing and writing and journaling about my son's death. And I decided to just write a fictionalized account of a 13-year-old boy who loses his big brother to suicide, and how he, tries to go back to school and go back to, normal when nothing is normal
Mm.
anymore.
Yeah, there's that stigma, right? I can only
Yeah,
imagine for siblings and other family members, perhaps. Now there's the death, there's the grieving, there's that part, and now it's like, okay, what's it like going to school, especially for somebody who's maybe in grade school or high school, especially. So,
right. And at that age, in that middle school, that 13-year-old age where it's that you feel like everybody's kind of staring at you anyway and
mhm.
judging you, and you feel very like like you're in a fishbowl. Um, and in those cases, you sort of are, you know, um, and the feeling that people are talking about you, and when you're not around is always a little bit um, off-putting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, in reading the book, I took a couple of screenshots of some paragraphs that I definitely wanted to bring up with you today. And I believe this is from chapter 9. It's referring to a sibling saying something like this. This could go for anybody, really, y'all. My classes were pretty normal. Mr. B, the teacher, Mr. B was right about my focus. I couldn't really concentrate on what was going on, but I guess I expected that. A few of the kids told me that they were sorry to hear about my brother. I don't know what I'm supposed to say to that. Mom and dad say, quote, thank you when people say that, but that seems weird to me. What are they thanking people for? Thank you for feeling sorry for me. I just say me too because I am. I am sorry he's gone. I don't know if that's right or not, but it's how I feel about it. And sometimes I just nod because if I try to say anything at all, I get all choked up. So I think obviously Kendra sums this up so well, doesn't she, in terms of giving us all an idea about what it's like for others affected by a loss like this. Any feedback on that particular paragraph, Kendra?
It was something that I had thought about a lot, as I was going through it, and people would say, I'm so sorry. And especially at the memorial, where you're just, person after person after person after person comes to you, and it really is just hard to know how to respond to that. And um and I always felt like after it was over, of course, in hindsight, I kind of felt like the me too, I'm sorry too, was a little bit more appropriate than thank you. But thank you is just what comes out, when somebody says that. Um, uh, and again, there was a lot of that, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. And one person came up to me and said, this sucks.
Oh,
And I laughed because it was like so shocking to me that, and I was like, yes, yes,
yeah,
and thank you. And that was a genuine thank you for that, because it does. And
yeah.
sometimes that's okay too, just calling out that like this is so messed up. Um, it's so messed up. It's just it's it's hard to
Yeah.
talk about. Yeah.
I love that. This sucks. Yeah. I think we all can go along with that one for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, and lastly, I just wanted to mention sometimes suicidal ideation, that whole thing can run in families. Now, this could be a little, a part maybe of our own DNA that we're not fully aware of as we try to
Right.
understand this topic more deeply. Or it could also just be, of course, what's role modeled by our peers, by
Right.
family members. Has that been an issue at all in either you or your husband's family in terms of a suicide happening? What's anything along that line?
Yes. Actually, yes. It's my father is he has been diagnosed. He was diagnosed many years ago with bipolar disorder and with borderline personality disorder. And what I've learned over the years about borderline personality disorder, which I'll just call BPD because it's easier,
Mhm.
is that it is not uncommon for people that have that to have, suicidal ideation. And my father had a tendency to share that with me. Uh, that we would be better off without him. That he, was um, uh, felt like he was, making us unhappy, and he knew he was difficult and all of that. And so I grew up um, hearing my dad say that to me, and then but my dad is still living, and he's 80 he's 84. And so for me, having Trevor be having Trevor have suicidal ideation, it didn't feel like that was something that people actually did, because from my experience with my
Mm-hmm.
dad, he talked about it and he didn't do it. And so I think that I kind of um, expected the same, um, because it's not something that you can wrap your head around, you know? And, but I do know that I do often wonder, um, he was not diagnosed when we brought him home, with anything other than depression and anxiety. But I have wondered since then if maybe he was struggling with bipolar disorder. And, because he did go from being really, really depressed to sort of coming around, and I don't know if you call it mania, but he was much more himself, and so I sort of wondered if maybe he had a little bit of that maybe he was bipolar, and that when he became, that cycled into depression again. Um, but I don't know, if that's true or not. Um, but my brother had also attempted
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
suicide,
Yeah.
and that was
So,
after we lost Trevor.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So very fascinating. And I think that's something for all of us to keep in mind when we have a suicide in the family, right? And so to be aware of, sometimes I think even society, we can have like the copycat
Yeah.
syndrome, basically,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah. So something to also talk about and be aware of. Um, So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, maybe where can they buy your book? And if they have questions for you, are you open to them contacting you? And if so, how can they reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to talk to anybody that wants to chat. Let's see. My book is available on Amazon, and the book I wrote, over, year and a half or so, and I self-published it because I didn't send it out to an editor. It's something that was just, it felt very personal to me, and I really felt like it was something that I wanted my friends and family involved in, and nothing outside of that, and because it's not a money making endeavor for me. Like, if whatever money I make on it, I will donate books to people who need it, who maybe can't afford it. But as far as the book goes, like I said, it's on Amazon, and it's called The Climb. And you could just look up my name, Kendra Nicholson, The Climb, and find it that way. And as far as contacting me, I guess my email address would probably be,
Yeah, and I'll put that in the, if you're okay with it, then I'll put it in the link below
yeah.
for anybody maybe who just even wants to perhaps just thank you, send you a thanks for
Oh, yeah,
speaking out so much about it and sharing your story, which is so helpful
absolutely.
to so many people. And by the way, everybody, she's being really modest about her book. So
Oh,
I talked to her yesterday and she said, it's an easy read. You'll get through it. It's very interesting. And it is. I just bought it on Amazon myself yesterday. I read it last night and so informative. And it draws you in because it's from the aspect of the brother's perspective, right? And so it's a very alive, real story as you're reading it. And you're learning. You're learning, of course, about something that is ignored quite a bit. People don't even want to say the word sometimes. So, of course,
yes.
we're talking about suicide. So we have to keep on talking about it. So, what was it like for you today to be talking about it to more and more? What's that like for you?
Um, it is, it's a mixed bag, you know, and as far as, I think today, it's like I said, it's been 6.5 years. It's been easier for me, I think, just to talk about it than it has in the past. I tried to do I did a public speaking event a couple of years ago, and it was so I just I kept feeling like crying, you know what I mean? And I kept
Mhm.
tearing up and having to stop. And I'm trying to learn not to apologize for my emotion. That, you know, if I try not to apologize if my pain makes other people uncomfortable, you
Mhm.
know, because I feel like being able to express that is part of learning how to deal with it. Um, and you know, nobody should have to apologize for their pain, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to just own it. Otherwise, we're gaslighting ourselves, right? So we
Exactly.
don't want to gaslight
Yeah.
ourselves. Yeah. And I did mention we can close on just I was so I thought it was so wonderful yesterday when you told me you're getting a clinical degree in psychology to
Yes.
perhaps have a private practice someday, right? And how much do
Yeah.
you think this is kind of a very broad question, but perhaps percentage wise, how much do you think that you were propelled into actually going now and studying it? I know you're enrolled in school now, and to perhaps get licensed someday is based on surviving the death of your son in this way, in terms of the
Oh,
suicide. Yeah.
100%. You know,
Okay.
it's sort of like with the book. I will tell you, when Trevor was in high school, we had a cancer scare with him. And it was 6 months of not being certain whether or not he had a malignant tumor in his neck. And I went to the doctor, and it was immediate specialists, immediate blood work. It was immediate MRI. They were on it because there was a sense of urgency,
Mm,
uh, because his life was in danger, perhaps, you know. Um, it was not cancer, we found out. But when he started struggling with his mental health, it was so hard to get him in to see somebody just for that initial appointment, because the system is so overrun with people needing help. And that sense of urgency, you know, my son's life was in danger again, but the sense of urgency wasn't there. And you know, it took some healing on my part in order to start moving forward. But once I did start moving forward, I immediately knew that, you know, again, I could complain about it or I could do something about it.
yeah.
And this is my choice, my way of helping.
Well, on behalf of anybody who hears this video, you are assisting so many people.
Oh,
We are so very thankful. Thank you so much for sharing a
yeah.
deep, intimate story, for educating all of us. I'll have links below, everybody, in terms of the National Suicide Hotline number, also a couple website links as to where to go if you're feeling that you need some help. And please leave some comments below, anything you'd like to add in terms of thoughts, feelings that come up for you today in terms of watching this video. So I'll say goodbye now, Kendra. Thank you so much, and
Thanks so
I
much,
wish you
Brad.
well.
Thank you so much.